An excerpt from Sallie House Haunting by Deborah Pickman. About 7:15 a.m., Tony had walked just to the left of the butcher block, got the orange juice from the refrigerator on the way to the counter across the room, and then continued to the cupboards on the far side of the stove and at the far side of the room. Although extremely tired when he came off this shift, he always took a few minutes to unwind before coming to bed. He'd gotten a glass out of the cupboard and poured the juice, and just as he was about to take a drink, he turned around to face the center of the kitchen and got the shock of his life. Standing in the middle of the room, just past the butcher block table, was a little girl with a surprised look in her big blue eyes. He judged her to be about 3.5 feet tall. Instantly, his heart plummeted to his feet and every muscle froze. In that instant, several things went through his mind. Who are you? Where did you come from? What do you want? And how did you get in my kitchen? Then he realized he had not heard either of the doors and that she had not walked in with him. Realization had begun to creep in as he noticed something odd about the way she was dressed. Her hair was neatly fastened on top with a ribbon and a large fancy bow. She looked to be in her Sunday best, but the style was old-fashioned, white eyelet lace and puffy sleeves. She had sweetly round, cherubic cheeks. She stood there shocked, curious and motionless, staring at him wide-eyed. For that instant, Tony seemed to lose control of his thoughts, muscles, and emotions. The glass slipped from his hand to the floor. The sound broke the trance he was in, and he instinctively looked at the floor in front of him. Juice and broken glass lay all over the floor. When he looked back up, the little girl was gone. She had not made a sound as she left the room. It happened in the blink of an eye. Still unable to move, Tony's fear squeezed him more as he began to realize what he had just witnessed. He'd just seen Sallie. Every culture has its ghosts, its legends, its mysteries.
From UFOs to haunted houses, psychic visions to cryptids, we explore the stories that defy explanation and what they reveal about what it means to be human.
I'm Chris Daly.
And I'm Ryan Geckner. We're anthropologists asking big questions about belief, experience, and the unknown.
This is Beyond the Human.
All right, so welcome back to Beyond the Human. We're here to talk a little bit about, our experiences at I think, one of the most maybe infamous locations in
One of the most
paranormal.
storied
Storied is a good way to put it. Yeah. So in our last episode, we talked a lot about kind of our own backgrounds and kind of why we wanted to do this podcast, our approach to doing this podcast, and kind of how our own academic backgrounds inform the way that we think about the paranormal. So today, we wanted to talk a little bit about, our own experiences as paranormal investigators. So it's not just that we sit and read the books about ghosts and spooky stuff, but we actually go out and do investigations, and we've actually done some, I guess you could say professionally. I mean, we were paid, so I guess that counts, right? And so, we wanted to talk a little bit about that. And so we're going to talk about our experiences with the Sallie House in Atchison, Kansas. And that excerpt that you just heard from Chris is from the book on the haunting, or the haunting that sort of made the Sallie House known. It's by Deborah Pickman. It's called The Sallie House Haunting. And I would recommend reading it if if this podcast episode kind of gets you interested in the story, because we're going to talk a lot about it, but on this kind of high level of like the big things that happened to them in the house, and kind of the things that have made the house famous. But if you want the nitty gritty of, what the Pickman's experience was, definitely check out the book. But before we get into that, let me just introduce kind of give you some context, because like we said last time, anthropologists love a little bit of context. So let's talk a little bit about kind of where the Sallie House is. So the Sallie House is located in a town called Atchison in Kansas. It's in northeast Kansas. It's about an hour northwest of downtown Kansas City, if you're familiar with the region. It's about, I don't know, how far is it from Lawrence, Chris?
From Lawrence? less than an hour.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's less than an hour.
But I don't think much less because of the
Yeah,
geography.
because it's weird. Yeah. So like if you're familiar with Eastern Kansas, it's up there in the corner where there's a whole lot of nothing but
And if you're driving from Kansas City up, you get to pass Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary,
yes,
which is
that's true.
cool.
You do, yeah, you do drive through Leavenworth depending on where you're coming from, yeah. Which is pretty cool. You drive in front of Leavenworth and see all the do not pick up hitchhiker signs, which is awesome. And so Atchison is a very small town. I think I have kind of a weird relationship with small towns because I grew up in a town of 800. So like Atchison having 10,000 people doesn't feel small to me, but to most everyone else in the world, 10,000 people is a very small town. And Atchison kind of is sort of the kind of stereotypical Western boom town kind of, story. So, in the early, period of Kansas being a territory before it was a state, Atchison was, really important for trade in terms of having good river landings on the Missouri River that were a little bit closer to Denver than the river landings in Kansas City. And so Atchison kind of establishes itself for being known for that. And later in its history, it becomes really important in the rail industry as the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe line starts in Atchison. But it's also known as the birthplace of Amelia Earhart. So for all of our listeners who are into the Amelia Earhart mystery, this is where it all starts. She's born there. They have a festival there every year.
And they have a nice little museum.
Yeah, they have a cool museum. Lots of cool stuff about Amelia Earhart there. They have like this huge, like, it's not an earthworks. It's like a cornfield thing that they grow that looks like her or whatever. Am I the only person who knows about this?
I, I don't know about that, but
I'm pretty sure they
I'm
do.
sure you're correct.
Yeah, they do. They have like this like memorial thing in Atchison that's like they do like this, it's like a corn mazy thing. It's a very Midwest thing. I don't know. But that's kind of
I didn't grow up in the Midwest.
yeah, it's a very Midwest thing. We do lots of stuff with corn. Corn Palace in South Dakota, we love corn. But that's kind of the setting that we're thinking about here with Atchison. Today it's, not known for a whole lot of things. They have
It's known for the Sallie
it's
House
known for the Sallie House. That's true.
and many other haunted locations in the
Yes.
town. The town is actually known very much as a place with a lot of activity.
Yes.
It's also known because Benedictine College is there.
That's true. Yeah, I forgot about Benedictine. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, some people in Kansas will call it the most haunted town in Kansas. I've heard it called the most haunted town in the United States. I don't know if I really buy that.
Into New Orleans and Key
I was
West.
gonna
So
say, yeah, it feels like there's some other places that may be, trying vying for that top
Savannah is up there.
Savannah, but undoubtedly, they're a big part of Atchison's identity and the culture in Atchison is this, sort of this association with haunted locations, paranormal activity. They have a whole period in the fall called the haunted season where you can go and tour all of these locations and you can investigate them, most of them year round, but it's really a big part of Atchison.
Yeah, and if you go to the Atchison Chamber of Commerce's website, you can learn all about the month of October,
Mhm.
really. And there's tons of different events. And I actually think there used to be a few more. It's died down somewhat, but there's still a lot of different events. You can do a trolley tour. You can see a variety of haunted locations. So if you're in that area, it's I think worth going to.
Yeah, yeah. So but if you look at Atchison and its association with paranormal phenomena, and you end up on Google looking at that for more than about 2 seconds, you will see many, many things about the Sallie House. I think the Sallie House is easily the most well known, probably one of the most important locations in Atchison for this association with the paranormal. And we're going to talk a little bit about why that is over the course of this episode. But the Sallie House is just, if you don't know anything about Atchison, it's just a very unassuming house in a neighborhood. You wouldn't think anything of it. It's across the street from other historic homes. So much of Atchison is old homes built, right around the period of the Civil War and earlier in some cases. And so you wouldn't think anything of it necessarily unless you knew. And so, the Sallie House is, one of these houses on the east side of town at 508 North 2nd Street in Atchison. And if you are familiar at all with like other paranormal locations, and if you look up the Villisca Axe Murder House, people will say that it's the same address. which
It's almost the same.
almost, which we always took that as like, okay, sure, whatever. And we looked it up in the process of researching for this episode. We are like, is that actually true? And it is almost the exact address. Villisca, if you're not familiar, Google it. But is at 508 East 2nd Street. But some people sort of claim this is like some sort of synchronistic connection between the
And
two.
that's in it's Iowa,
Iowa,
right?
yeah, it's in like middle of nowhere, Iowa. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where 8 people were murdered with an axe, and it is
Yes.
another haunted location, known haunted location. Really, really sad story. Maybe we'll do an episode on that.
Yeah, we probably will. Yeah, more than likely we will get to that. We're going to hit all the Midwestern hotspots because I'm on this podcast. So, but so to give you just like some history of the house itself before we get into like kind of um the story that kind of sits at the core of like its association with the paranormal. The house that is now known as the Sallie House was built in 1866, or was really built between 1866 and 1871 by a guy by the name of Michael Finney. During the construction of this house, his family actually lived in the basement. The basement of this house is very important for the sort of lore surrounding the house, which we'll get to in a second. But I think that's interesting to note just because having been in the house a lot, I can't imagine living in the basement by myself, let alone with my entire family.
It's not a very big
It's
basement.
it's not very big. It's not very pleasant. I can't imagine it was more pleasant in 1866.
There might have been less mold.
There might have been less mold there. Yeah, we will get to the mold. And so
Mold
um,
plays a large role in this story
mold
too.
plays a huge role in this story. And so MC Finney, who he's sometimes referred to as, lived in the house with his family and had several children. I'm not going to give you his whole, sort of family tree because it's not super important to the story necessarily, but I will talk about one of his children, Charles Finney, who becomes important to this story. Who was a doctor who had a practice in downtown Atchison. There are reports of this. We actually know the cross streets where it was at. This is important later. Remember that. Put a pin in that. He was also the mayor of Atchison from 1913 to 1916, and interestingly enough, stepped down after a scandal over selling alcohol at the local Eagles Lodge. And that was scandalous in 1916 because Kansas actually became a dry state in 1881. Kansas was like on the cutting edge of the Prohibition game, I guess.
Well,
And
there's
so
something to be on the cutting edge of.
yeah, I guess, yeah. If Kansas is going to be on the cutting edge of anything, I guess it's prohibition. And so he was kind of, a figure, a well-known figure in Atchison. For more than just this scandal, he was also an accomplished figure skater, which is like just somewhat random, I guess, to me anyway. And he also was known to have skated as under the name of Miss Colby of Baltimore, where he skated as a
As a
female
female
skater.
skater.
And in his obituary, this is a direct quote. They said that he sometimes, quote, skated so gracefully, few spectators knew his true identity. And there's like some interesting stories with that. Like he was kicked out of some competitions because he did this sometimes.
So he was a cross-dresser,
Yes,
particularly in the world of
in the
skating.
world of
We
skating.
don't know if he was a cross-dresser outside of that,
Right.
but this becomes important later
Yes.
as well for
Yeah.
some of the things we did when we were investigating.
Yeah.
So just again, another thing to remember.
Put a pin in that. Put a pin in MC or in Charles Finney.
Yeah.
And the other thing to note about the Sallie House itself is actually the house next door was built by James Finney, which was one of Michael Finney's other sons. And the house was built in 1979. And it, interestingly, this is one thing that many people don't talk about in relationship to the basement. It actually has a tunnel that connects both houses. It's since been bricked up.
I would say, or did have
Yeah,
a
it did
tunnel,
have a
but you
tunnel.
can't go between them now. They're
Which
actually
is
they're
lame.
owned by different people now.
Yes.
So
Which is lame. And just because we're a paranormal podcast and someone's going to ask how many deaths were there in the house. So in the Sallie House itself, there are 4 known deaths. Several of these are members of the Finney family. A member of the Finney family lived in this house up until, if I remember correctly, like the 1930s. And so this house stayed in their hands for a very long time, or a member of their family. And then there is one death in the neighboring house that we know of. And so there are 5 deaths associated with the property and the neighboring property because they were bought together. Um, and that's kind of the most that we have about the sort of, or I guess that's the most that you really need to know about the sort of deep history of the house, I guess.
and those are all things that are very well
Yes.
documented
Yes.
historical fact, for lack of
Yes.
a better word. I actually don't like the term fact
Well, yeah, that's a whole nother story.
because history is, it is written by somebody. So,
Yes, that's right. And that somebody has feelings about things.
but those are actual historical facts. We will talk about the story of Sally,
Yes.
which is not historical
Yeah,
fact.
because you'll notice none of the names I've dropped yet have been Sally.
Right.
And that becomes important. The story really of the Sallie House doesn't really start until the early 1990s. So we have all this stuff happening in the late 1800s. People are living in the house, may or may not be running liquor illegally, and cross-dressing as skaters, which is freaking awesome. Like I don't know why that is not the story that we're telling about this house. I wish it was. Um, and then in the 1990s, a family by the name of the Pickmans moves in 1992. And Chris, you want to tell us a little bit about kind of how they come into this picture and what happens with them?
Well, so that the Pickmans, they rent the home in 1992, and they move in, and so they're a young couple, but Deborah is pregnant,
Mm-hmm.
and so they're expanding their family, so they get a house that has 3 bedrooms, and this house has 3 bedrooms on the second floor, and then the first floor is set up like many homes of most time periods, but
Yeah.
basically there's a living room, there's a dining room, they're connected, and then there's a kitchen. There is now a small half bathroom, but that wasn't there
Mm-hmm.
in the beginning. I don't know if it was there when the Pickmans were there.
It was.
It
It was.
was.
Mm.
And then of course there's stairs down to the basement. Interesting thing about this house,
Oh yes, I
there's a
forgot this.
door
Yes.
that leads out of the kitchen, and it goes onto a deck which is in the
In the backyard.
backyard
Yeah.
of today.
Yes.
But when the house was built, the streets were a little bit different. And so the back of the house today was the front of the
Mm-hmm.
house at one time. So it's set up just kind of strange
Yep.
because of that. So on the other side, you have the living room with what was the back door and is now
Mm-hmm.
the front door. And that's where it faces Second Street to kind of orient you to the house. So they move in, and they have a lot of reports of many different things happening. I mean, you've probably heard, most of you have probably heard a lot of the reports of these kinds of things with moving objects, apparitions, spontaneous fires, scratches, all kinds of things. Much of this centers around Tony.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but let's fast forward a little bit to when people start paying attention
Mm-hmm.
to what's going on. Um, and so, where should we start there? Let's just give some examples of things that happened in the house. So,
Yeah, yeah. So like when they shortly after they move in, after their son is born, there's a room you'll hear about
there's really no activity until the son is
yeah,
born.
they to be fair, they weren't in the house that long
No.
before he was born, and so one of the bedrooms they set up as a nursery, obviously because they have a baby, and the Deborah starts noticing that she'll go into this room and there will be toys that are like on the floor in the middle of the room. And they're set up, it's not like, you know, they just, well, I mean, he's a newborn, so he's not playing with the toys anyway, but like, it's not like a kid just leaves the toy out. It's sitting in the middle of, it looks very intentional. And she starts to notice this and she's like, that's kind of odd. And that is kind of the first thing that sort of triggers her to think, okay, maybe something paranormal is going on here. And she, at the time, I
I don't
think,
think it was an immediate thing. I mean,
no,
we listened to Deborah and
oh,
Tony.
speak,
We
yeah.
saw them speak, and one of the things that Deborah was talking about was, she thought someone was messing with them.
Yeah. So at the time, I was just about to say that Tony's brother, I guess, had a key to the house because Tony's family lives in Atchison, and he would come over, and she was convinced that it was him coming over and just messing with them, before she jumped to okay, maybe there's something a little bit more
Which is, of course, what a lot of people do
unexplained. Yeah.
when they start having unexplained things happen in their homes. And so the
Hmm.
beginning of the story of the hauntings, I think, is very similar to what you hear about a lot of people having hauntings in their homes.
Hmm. Hmm.
They think someone's messing with them, they notice little things out of place. And so that's all very, I'm going to say normal for someone
Normal for
experiencing,
the paranormal.
normal for the paranormal. Um, but things ramp up, I would say pretty dramatically, relatively quickly, because they were not in this house for all that long.
No, they only lived there for a total of 22 months. They moved in 1992 and moved out in 94 after a whole bunch of weird things happened. And so the moving objects thing is, kind of what kicks it off. But later, like the excerpt that Chris read at the top, eventually Tony is seeing full-bodied apparitions in the house. And that's not the only one that he sees, right? So there's later, if you're familiar at all with the Paranormal Witness episode about the Sallie House, um, they took some liberties with the story, but there is, a report that Tony talks about of, when he was sleeping in their master bedroom and he sees this woman sort of materialize out of a kind of dark mist at the foot of his bed and kind of holds him down on his bed. And he has some sort of, I think what some people would call like sleep paralysis type experiences in the house. And so, we're having everything from, little stuff of moving objects. I think, there are reports, Deborah and Tony talk about sitting in the living room of the house and there's a ceiling fan in the room and seeing the pull chain move. And they, basically are communicating with the spirit in the house and saying, hey, can you move that? And then it does. But as they start to get more and more curious about this, a friend of the family suggests that they have a local psychic come in. Her name's Barbara Connor. And they have her come to the house to basically see what's going on. At this point, they think there's something paranormal happening here. And Barbara comes over to the house and says that she senses the spirit of a girl named Sally. And this is where we get the first instance of anyone in this record telling us anything about someone named Sally.
And interestingly, she doesn't always get the credit
No,
for
she does not. That is very true.
for
That is
being the
true.
first to say that.
Yeah.
Peter James often gets the credit,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll talk about him,
Mm-hmm.
but he was not the first to say that,
Yeah.
though.
Yeah, and so
Just to
she,
give her her credit.
yeah, absolutely. And so she comes in the house, and Deborah is kind of like, what should we do with this? How should we respond? And basically, Barbara suggests, just talk to Sally like she's here. Basically, if she's misbehaving and doing something you don't want her to do, send her to her room. That's something that
And include
Barbara
her in
says.
conversations, include
Yeah,
her in
include
things.
her.
And Deborah really
She really gets into this.
gets into this.
Really gets into this.
I mean, she buys gifts for Sally,
Yes.
toys and things. She
Yeah.
really starts to include her in things. And this is where Deborah and Tony start having really different
Start to diverge.
experiences.
Yes, they start to diverge because while Deborah's having these experiences where, she at one point she leaves out like a piece of paper on a clipboard with a crayon and she's like writing questions out to Sally and leaving it for her to answer. And I think at one point she asks how old she is and Sally writes or draws like a big 7 on the paper supposedly. Um, Meanwhile, Tony is having experiences that are
Not so nice.
not so nice. Like I said, with the, sort of sleep paralysis apparition experience, but also, spontaneous fires that are happening to Tony, and just in the house in general. So they don't just exclusively happen to Tony, but there are several instances throughout the time that they're in the house where these fires just happen. And that's kind of one of Deborah's and Tony's main concerns about the haunting is like,
Well, that would be concerning
I
to
don't
me.
want my house to burn down because I'm renting and I don't have renter's insurance. No. And so, that's kind of part of where Barbara comes in and says, well, just, tell her to go to her room when she's misbehaving, treat her like you would, your own misbehaving kid.
Okay,
But,
I've had misbehaving
like-
kids. They don't start fires all the time.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, no
I've
kidding.
never had a misbehaving
No kidding.
kid do that. So
And so, and there's examples of this that like from simple stuff like Tony laying on a pillow and there being like a singed outline of his face on the pillow to at one point there's like a doll that's on the floor or it's on the steps, it's on the stairs and it just like bursts into flames in the middle of a Christmas party if I remember right. With a bunch of people in the house, so it's not like there were lots of witnesses, lots of people to not think that someone was trying to fake it or something like that. And so so that kind of goes on for, a period of time where things kind of mellow out, but there's some things that are weird. At a couple points, Tony is scratched I guess pretty violently, I guess you would say. And this is sort of where I think a lot of people look at this story and make leaps to things that it may or may not be. So I think some people assume that this spirit is demonic to some degree because of the scratches, because of the spontaneous fires, which is, we have opinions about that, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But, I think there's some room for debate around that. But ultimately, they're in the house and they live here for these 22 months, and eventually they get connected up with the crew of Sightings. Now, if you're not familiar, Sightings was like one of the kind of first paranormal sort of reality shows, right? It was the first show that wasn't really fictionalized. It was like, we're going to go out, kind of like Unsolved Mysteries in a way, and like investigate these things, record it, and put it on cable television.
And it wasn't like the Pickmans immediately jumped on board and were like, yes, let's talk about our
No,
house. They
yeah,
actually, it took a bit for
yeah,
Sightings to convince them,
yes,
to be willing to be on TV and all this stuff. Because that's particularly back then,
back
this
then,
this
yeah,
was a big ask.
yeah,
You didn't look necessarily good.
right, right,
In today's world, there's so many of these shows out there, and so many people want to be on these
right,
shows. That wasn't true at
yeah,
that time.
yeah.
So there's a lot of discussion about, well, were they just looking for attention, this and that? And I think I don't think at least in the beginning, I have no idea today, but at least
That's
in
how
the
they feel about it
beginning,
now. Yeah.
right? So now they may feel
Yeah.
totally differently, but they didn't just jump up and say like, "Yay, let's go to Sightings."
Yeah, and I think, one thing, I mean, you can, if you read the book, Tony had like lots of misgivings about the show. And ultimately they're on 4 episodes of the show, and toward the end, like Tony takes some serious convincing to like let the Sightings crew come back. And I have some like just personal feelings about that because the book is interesting. You should read the book. Let me just put it that way. You should read the
We
book.
should link to the book.
Yes, we will absolutely link to the book. It will be in the show notes. Um, and so they come, they're on Sightings for 4 separate episodes. And if memory serves me correct, the first couple episodes, they're like a segment of the show, and then the last couple, they are the full show. And so it becomes one of the more popular sort of segments or cases that's on Sightings. And I think the most important thing to point out, apart from the fact that they do have phenomena that happens during these recordings, and you should go, they're on YouTube, go find them and watch them. They're interesting. The audio and video quality is not the best because it was the 90s, but whatever. And one of the things about these episodes, or I guess the most important thing to point out, is that by the time the third episode rolls around, Peter James, who's a renowned psychic or was a renowned psychic, is invited into the house. And this is kind of the big deal, or a big deal for the show and also for the Pickmans and for the story of Sallie, right? And so Peter James comes in, and according to Deborah in the book, according to the Sightings crew, and we have no reason to doubt that, he is given, he comes in blank, he comes in cold, he doesn't have any um, previous information about the house, and he immediately senses a spirit, as a little girl's spirit named Sallie. And he goes on to interact with her, and eventually he is taken to a gravesite in Atchison, and he's shown the grave of a woman by the name of Sallie Hall.
And notice Ryan used the word woman,
Woman, yes, this is
not
important.
girl.
This is important. So, he is taken to her grave, and he claims that this is the grave of the spirit that he's talking to. Now, there's a couple of issues with this. So, number one, um, as you heard in the beginning, Tony sees the apparition of a little white girl with blue eyes. Um,
That he
that
actually
he
he drew a
that
picture
he
of,
drew.
and
Yeah, if you
and
Google
you can
Sallie,
yeah, you can
you'll
Google it.
find it.
It's also on, I think, some of the paranormal shows
Yes.
have shown that picture that he drew.
Yeah.
He's actually a pretty good
Yeah, he's a good
artist.
artist too. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like he does other things other than ghosty stuff. And so Sallie Hall, on the other hand,
Whose grave this
whose
is.
grave this um, is we have actually records of her.
Right.
And we have at least her obituary, and we know that she was a 34-year-old black woman who died about a block and a half away from the Sallie House.
A
Um,
34-year-old woman with, was it 16 children?
14 children, had
14.
14
Oh,
children
14
over
children,
16 years,
16
over
years.
16 years, and
Regardless, that is a lot of kids.
I think all but like three of them survived birth. It's a gnarly, tragic story for
Yeah.
her, and really has no association with the Sallie House, and continually gets brought up in this story because of that episode. Now, the other thing to note, and this is the thing where it gets kind of weird for me because I don't know, you may be able to tell by the way we're telling this story, or at least by the way I'm telling this story, that I have some doubts about pieces of the story. I will say that I think that Deborah and Tony absolutely experienced things in this house. Having met them, they talk about having activity or experiencing activity since moving from the house.
Mhm.
So I don't.
And Tony actually talks about having had some activity surrounding him his whole
His
life.
whole life, right?
So not just since this house.
Right.
So that's an important thing to think about because that suggests that maybe it's not just the location.
Right, right. And so in this episode where they bring in Peter James, they also bring in the previous tenants of the house. So these are the people who lived in the Sallie House before the Pickmans moved in. And their daughter had claimed that she played with an imaginary friend by the name of Sally in the house when they lived there. And there were reports of finding toys moved in the house. So similar things to what Deborah reports at the beginning of their experiences, right? And so that's kind of interesting, or an interesting point to the story, right?
That's another connection to a Sally.
Yeah, another connection to a Sally. But one of the things that Peter James does when he's there is he tells this story as, according to him, as it's told to him by this spirit of this little girl, said to him, about her death. And this story kind of becomes the like foundation of the lore surrounding the Sallie House. And so he tells a story of one night a mother comes in with her, 6, 7-year-old daughter. She's complaining of stomach pains.
So you got to go back to where they were coming to.
Yeah, they were coming to the Sallie House, which at the time
At the
was
time was
Charles Finney's house, who is the doctor. So remember
And so
that.
there's an interesting piece of this because they're saying they're going to his home. Now, remember, he did live there.
He did.
We know that. We know he had a practice downtown. To any historical fact that we can
Mhm.
find, he never practiced medicine in his home,
Mhm.
as most physicians don't.
At the time, it wasn't entirely uncommon.
Sure,
But
but there's no evidence
there's no
that he
evidence
did
that he
so.
did.
And the house is certainly not set up in such a way that, there would have been an office
Right.
in there. I'm
Right.
not saying you couldn't see a patient and do something,
course,
but nothing is set up such that there would have been an office or certainly a surgical suite,
Right. Yeah.
anything like that. So that's just kind of an important piece of that.
Yeah, and so he claims that the spirit tells him that this mother comes, she's bringing her child in, she's got stomach pains. He claims she's got appendicitis, and we need to perform an emergency appendectomy. And reportedly, he starts to operate on her. She dies on the operating table, and her last, what did we read the other day? Her last
Sight were of a man who she thought was trying to torture her or kill her.
Yes, yeah.
Which, I mean, that's obviously pure conjecture. No one could know what
Yes.
anybody's, even if we assume Sally is real, all
Yeah,
that, nobody
yeah.
could know what her last thoughts were.
And I think so that story has kind of, if you look up anything about the Sallie House, you will run into this story. This is kind of the going narrative that explains what's going on in this house. And
There is no historical evidence of it
to suggest it's happening. And
any historical evidence of a Sally of that age affiliated with this house,
associated at all with this house.
other than as a potential ghost.
Right. And you'll also hear some versions of the story where people will claim, and we've had people tell us this before, that the house was set up as his practice on the first floor, and then the family lived upstairs. The way the house is laid out, I just can't see how that's possible.
Because the kitchen's on the first.
There's just 3 bedrooms and a full bath upstairs. That's it. There's no common areas upstairs. It just doesn't make sense to me, especially because we know he had an office downtown. So, for me, that gives me I have room to doubt some parts of this story. Now, where do we come in? Why are we even having this conversation? Why are we starting with the Sallie House? Well, um, back in 2014, we started leading the public investigations. Us, along with some other folks that we work with, led the public investigations during the Atchison haunted season. And so we would lead members of the public through the house, and not just as a tour, but as an active paranormal investigation.
Right. We did not have anything to do with they do these sort of open house tours where
Yeah.
they run a lot of people through over the course of a couple of hours. That wasn't us. We ran the evening investigations,
Hmm.
as well as some private investigations that people hired us for
Yeah.
at that
Yeah.
house. The
Yeah. I
one
mean,
that I
yeah,
remember was a bachelorette party that
yeah. That
not
was.
sure why that is your bachelorette party,
I
but you
mean,
know what?
hey,
You
you
did.
know what? Someone who's doing a bachelorette party at the Sallie House is probably the type of person that will listen to this podcast. So you know
There
what?
you go.
Anybody who likes to do that, you just keep on listening. That's a great idea. We love that for you. But so all of that's to say that like we have backgrounds in paranormal research. We've done paranormal investigating before this. We didn't just kind of fall into it and we were like, hey, yeah, we'll investigate there. We had investigated locally in the Kansas City area. We were known because of some people on our team. Um, Basically, that we would be a group of people that would be interested in leading those. And part of the reason they approached us, if I remember right, was that was part of our approach to how we do investigations, right?
Because we try to debunk first.
Yeah.
We try to provide some sort of scientific explanation for whatever we can, uh, whatever's in the investigation that you could provide scientific
Yeah.
evidence for.
Yeah.
We'll explain a little bit about what we did when looking at the Sallie House to try to debunk things. But we provide a bit more of an academic
Hmm.
experience, and we don't like to sensationalize. And I think
Yeah.
that was something that at that time, and I don't know if the town is still like this, but at that time, the Chamber of Commerce did not want to sensationalize
Hmm.
all of this. Well, I shouldn't say the whole Chamber of Commerce. There were some
There's
people,
certain individuals, yes.
individuals who were really excited about the idea of having a more academic group come in. There were others who I think really did not like
Yeah.
that.
Probably, yeah, yeah.
But we were there for 5 years,
Hmm.
2014 to 2019. And during that time, we did over 250 hours of investigations. There was,
A lot.
you know, yeah, and we have literally over 1,000 hours of evidence from the location. Um, I will say not all of it has been gone through. We probably have
It's not.
we have the Holy Grail out there
We
probably,
probably
and we
do.
have not found it because we just have not gone through all of the
Yeah,
evidence.
yeah.
And any of you who do investigations know that it's rough to get through all of the evidence.
It's so hard.
And when you're in the same location that often, sometimes you just don't even care.
Yeah. Hmm.
And
Hate
you
to say that, but it's
you
true.
don't want to listen to yourself telling the same stories over and over. When you
Public
when
every.
you lead public investigations, you tend to tell the same stories over and over. And
Yes.
so yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but as Ryan mentioned, we had been doing some investigating. So I don't know, do you want to say a little bit about your background or favorite experiences?
Yeah, I guess yeah, that would be good. Yeah. Well, so we've kind of investigated all over, or a little bit anyway, particularly throughout the Midwest, but we've been to, I guess, we've investigated Sallie House a gazillion times. We've done most everything in the Kansas City metro that there is to do. So there's a couple of historical sites in the metro that are really cool. Alexander Majors and the Warnell House. Check them out. They're very cool. Um, we've done Waverly a couple of times, Bobby Mackey's. You've done more than me. You've been all over, but
That's because I'm older than you.
that's fine. And I didn't say it was bad. I was just saying. But so we've kind of investigated all over. And I guess my favorite experience or most memorable, I guess, probably is Waverly. I mean, Waverly is just kind of a creepy place anyway, just because it's an old sanitarium. It's out in the middle, or no, it's a
It's a
sanatorium.
sanatorium.
I always mess that up. It's a sanatorium. That's important, and that's an important difference. Yeah.
It's one
And
letter, but
it is, but it's very different. Um, I think it's creepy just because it's like old and it's dark and you're outside. Um,
and the history of the
and the
location
history is gnarly. It's rugged. So if you don't know about Waverly, it was a tuberculosis hospital in
lots of
the
deaths.
early 20th century. Lots of deaths. It's a massive property. It's super cool. The people that work there are awesome too, by the way. So if you get a chance to pop in there, you should. They're great. Um, but I think this was probably I think this was our second time going to Waverly because we've been there twice. And so if you look up Waverly, it's kind of V-shaped sort of. And when you're walking, there's stairwells that run up the middle of that, kind of the point of the V. And we were walking, and I come around a corner by the stairwell, and I swore. They told us before, be cognizant of the possibility that there could be homeless folks, squatting in here, whatever. So, keep, your wits about you, just because you may run into something that's, not so paranormal. And I come around this corner and I see just out of the corner of my eye, I could have sworn in the stairwell, I saw like this guy just like kneeling down in the bottom of the stairwell. And we were walking to go back to kind of their little gift shop where it was our kind of our staging area, right? And so I wasn't really like trying to pay attention to paranormal stuff. I probably wanted a snack and something to drink, honestly. And
It's
so
really cold
it
too.
was cold. It was very cold. And so I was probably just moving. And I see this guy out of the corner of my eye, and I stopped as I got past the stairwell and backed up and looked back down the stairwell, and there was nothing there. And I still don't know what that was. It still kind of freaks me out a little bit. Like I can see the dude's face when I think about it. It kind of freaks me out. Um, because it's very weird. Like yeah, I can't explain it. Um, I've had, we've captured lots of weird evidence that if you go follow us on Patreon, you can watch yourself. And lots of weird EVPs and stuff. But I think that one sticks with me. Because I've only seen stuff a handful of times like that. I've seen shadows and that kind of thing, but seeing a full body person that actually wasn't there is pretty gnarly.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would say so.
Yeah.
And
What about you?
Waverly's up there for me to as a location.
Yeah, Waverly's cool.
Missouri State Penn's a cool
Mm.
location too.
Yeah, how did I forget
Very
that?
cool
Yeah, we've been there a
location.
whole bunch. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think some of my favorites, Myrtle's Plantation,
Myrtles, yeah.
is a fantastic location to go to. Didn't have anything particularly strange happen while we were there. And I keep saying we,
Sure.
my husband and I investigate together. Um, but we got some great pictures from there of energy trails and apparitions sort of starting to form. And this was back when we used film
Back on the
camera.
film camera days.
Digital cameras existed at the time, but I love film
Yeah,
photography, and
yeah.
so I was using a film camera then, and so we didn't see it while we were at the
Okay.
location. With digital photography, and
Yeah.
that's why I switched to digital. You can see it there, but I think that was some of the coolest evidence was some of those pictures, and we'll put some of those up.
Hmm.
My other favorite is the Stanley Hotel
Yeah,
in
yeah.
Estes Park, and
That's right.
maybe that's because I'm a huge Stephen King fan, but when we went there, we stayed in you can stay in the Stephen King room, which is just it's a room he stayed in, and this was his inspiration for the book The Shining.
Hmm.
The book was not written there. Some people think that he sat there and wrote it. I mean, he'd have been there a long
Like
time.
forever.
But it was an
It's
inspiration.
not an extended stay hotel.
No. Um, so of course, when I went there, I had to stay in the Stephen King room because that's just who I am. Um, so we went there and we checked in, went upstairs, and we were planning that night to go on. They have sort of a paranormal tour where they just tell you stories and
Mm.
things about things that have happened on the property. And so we had gotten tickets for that, and we went up to the hotel room. We were just gonna sort of relax briefly before going out later that day. Um, and so my husband came in and he took his wallet and his keys and he put them down on the table and went to go take a shower. So meanwhile, I lay down on the bed, I'm reading, whatever. My husband comes out of the bathroom and says, "Hey, where's my wallet?" And I said, "I don't know. Didn't you put it on the table?" And he said, "Well, I thought I put it on the table, but it's not here." And so, our first thought was, okay, so he didn't put it there. Let's look around. So we start looking around. And we very quickly started panicking because we couldn't find his wallet. And so we tore this room apart. I mean, really tore his room apart because your wallet's important. He went back down to the hotel desk and said, like, hey, did I leave my wallet here? There was nothing. We went out to the car, checked the car. We're freaking out, and we're like, but wait a second, you put, the hotel room on your card, so we had it there.
Yeah.
Back up in the room, we're tearing the room apart again. And this literally was, well over an hour of us freaking out. Uh, and so we're like, okay, what do we have to do? We have to cancel credit cards. We just started thinking like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that's where your
Yeah.
mind goes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then we turn around, and on the floor, in the very center of the floor, is his wallet, sitting there sort of tented up. And on top of his wallet are the tickets for the paranormal tour.
Man, that's spooky.
And I tell that story, and everyone's like, oh, you just missed it. No, we did not miss it because we tore that place apart because we thought we were missing
And why would you
credit
why would
cards.
you put a
Why would
wallet?
Right.
Yeah.
So that's one of my favorite experiences. I would say my most impactful experiences have all been in private homes,
Sure.
or private offices. We have investigated offices as well, and
Yeah.
you'll probably hear about some of those
Yep. Yep.
over time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's a fun experience. I won't go into some of the darker experiences. That's
Sure.
another day.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Our backgrounds in the paranormal research kind of are what got us into doing these investigations for the city of Atchison and helping to run those public investigations. And so, we did a lot of our own research as we, once they asked us to do this, we were like, okay, well, we want to kind of know a little bit more about the history of the house. We kind of had the sort of nickel tour version because we'd been told it ourselves,
Mhm.
but we hadn't ever really spent a lot of time digging into sort of the real nitty gritty history of who's lived in the house, their lives, those things. And that's kind of where the opening parts of this podcast or this episode come from, is digging into newspaper articles and finding stuff about Charles Finney getting kicked out of skating competitions and all of that kind of stuff. And so we really did a bunch of deep research in that because we wanted to find out, like, is there anything out there that can point to a Sallie? And we didn't find anything. We didn't find anything more than the stuff that Deborah mentions in her book. She talks about finding the Sallie Hall obituary and all of that. And so we kind of use that as the basis for our approach to investigating at the Sallie House. And in addition to doing that, we also, having been in the house before, we wanted to kind of know what we were walking into environmentally. And do you want to talk about kind of some of the things we sort of worked to debunk as we, started?
So I'll start that by saying one of the things. So I've mentioned I have a medical and public health background. Part of my background is in environmental assessments, particularly home environment assessments for problems in your home environment, all the way from carbon monoxide to lead paint to mold to all kinds of different things. So I grabbed my team of people, or a couple people from my team at work, who do environmental assessments, and we went up to Atchison and said, okay, let's see what's in this house. Let's see what kind of environmental issues might be in this house that could explain some of the things that are happening. And so we ran a full scale assessment. Some of the things we were looking at what's in the air, particulate counts, what kinds of mold spores might be in the air. We also looked at mold. There's a lot of mold in this house. We looked at mold in various locations, took samples so that we could tell, species. I was also particularly curious, am I breathing in black mold? Because, don't want to do that.
I'd rather not.
Yeah. So we looked at that. We looked at electrical wiring. We looked at the foundation. We looked at, sort of safety issues too, just to see sort of what might be going on. So we run this full scale investigation. While we're there, probably the most paranormal thing that ever happened to us happened. And that is a three-legged cat
Oh yeah, the three-legged
came to
cat.
visit and was eating some of our tater tots from Sonic.
That's right. That's right. I forgot about that.
And this poor cat, so three-legged, but surgically removed, clearly
Yeah,
surgically
yeah.
removed. And so we were worried about the cat because he was starving and looking thin, so brought him to the Humane Society, and it turned out his owners were looking for him,
That's awesome.
and so we were able to reunite a family with their three-legged cat,
It
which
is the
is
best.
which is awesome.
We love that.
But yeah, so it was a three-legged black cat.
And there's some weird associations with cats with this house. I mean, first of all, that's not the only stray cat we found at this house. So
Oh
there's
yeah, you
that.
brought one
I
home.
brought one home, and then yeah, that's a whole story. Yeah, like we got ringworm and everything.
Yes.
It was terrible. But yeah, there's weirdness with cats in this
Yeah.
house. So, um, during the time when the Pickmans were in the house, I forgot to mention this
This
in
is
my
my least favorite
recap.
story about
This
this.
is my least favorite. I hate this. This is probably why I didn't bring it up.
Yeah.
But there are two cats who died while the Pickmans are there. One of them is literally run through the clothes dryer, um, which yeah, that's a whole thing. I don't even know what else to say about that.
Yeah.
And then there is another where Tony reports that he is being influenced by whatever is in the house. And he reportedly kills a cat, one of their cats in the house.
Was it one of theirs or was it a
It was,
stray?
or no, it was
I
a
thought it was
stray.
a
You're right. It was
stray.
a stray that had supposedly wandered into the house, which again, that's kind of odd in and of itself.
Well, cats, they do that sometimes
Yeah, I
for
guess.
food,
Yeah,
Oh,
that's true. But yeah, so he kills this cat in the house, and he's open about this. You know, it's in the book, and also like when we saw them speak, he talked about it. Um, and so there may or may not be two ghost cats there as well, which we,
we've
very
named them.
lovingly named Mittens and Buttercup. So if you're ever at the Sallie House, uh,
Say hi to Mittens
please
and
say
Buttercup.
hi to Mittens and Buttercup for us, please.
Oh. Anyway, so
But
yeah,
yes, anyway, going back
this
to
is my least favorite story about the
the
house because
assessment, yes.
I I am very much an animal lover and feel that the punishments for animal cruelty should be
Hmm.
as harsh as possible.
Hmm. Hmm.
So anyway, going back to the environmental
That's
assessment. So some of the things that we found as we were looking at this. First of all, I will say it is an older home. So yes, there are foundation issues. Yes, there's a lot of um, not right angles.
Yes.
So,
I
the
think
floor
I think
slopes.
there are more non-right angles in that
Yeah, there are
house
very few right
than
angles in
there
that.
are.
But what that means is, things roll. So
Yes.
if you put something on the floor, the potential for it rolling is very natural and there.
Mhm.
Um, it also means that when you're in the house, you can get sort of fun house effect, meaning, because the floors are at a weird angle and the ceiling's at a weird angle, you don't necessarily feel stable.
Mhm.
And the same is true when walking up and down the stairs. The stairs back in the mid 1800s, people were smaller, shorter,
Mhm. Smaller
um,
feet.
smaller feet, and the
Mhm.
stairs are very narrow.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and so when
And
you're
they're steep.
and they're very
Very
steep,
steep.
and so as you walk up and down them, you can kind of feel
As if
like you're falling.
yeah.
And
It's something people report being pushed down the stairs.
and I'm not saying that no one's been pushed. I'm just
Yeah,
saying that
yeah.
this is something to realize when you're there, so that if you're walking up and down the stairs and you get a weird feeling, stop for a second and think, well, is this feeling paranormal, or is this simply because the stairs are weird. But the same thing again in different rooms, it can just feel a little strange because everything is kind of sloped a little
Hmm.
and feels weird. So that was one of the first things we noticed. um, we also noticed that the basement's it's old.
Hmm.
It is full of cobwebs, dust. There was a wasp's nest.
It is the stereotypical creepy old basement.
It is. It's a
Hmm.
creepy old basement.
It's like a limestone foundation basement. It's creepy.
And at points, it was furry
Yes,
with
yes, it
mold.
was. With mold, not with anything paranormal. Just
Yeah, and so we looked at the mold and we tested it and to see sort of, what we were finding there. And we did not find Stachybotrys, which is black mold. So we were very excited about that. But we did find quite a few other species of mold. The most common were a couple of different species of what's called Aspergillus. Aspergillus is a very, very common spore to find. It's sort of everywhere.
Mhm.
Anywhere that's damp, you're going to have Aspergillus. But the levels of Aspergillus in this house were higher than the lab we had taken our samples to had ever seen in an indoor
Hmm.
environment.
Hmm.
Um, just astronomically high. And so, what that means, well, for someone like me who has asthma, and that's one of my triggers, um, it meant be careful breathing. But it also meant for many, many people that when you go into the house, you don't feel right.
Hmm.
You get very congested. You might have a little bit of trouble breathing, um, and you might feel odd
Hmm. Like a
because,
heavy feeling,
yeah,
just
that sort of
yeah,
heavy feeling,
yeah.
the moisture in the air, and so that feeling has a very natural explanation. And the levels of aspergillus were just, I mean, insanely high. The particulate matter in the house was insanely high, which
Hmm.
you would expect also, again, from an older home. And one that's not open a lot.
Right.
There's no one living there, so the windows and stuff aren't open that often, and so that tends to increase the particulate matter in a house. Um, it also explains some of the orb behavior
Yeah,
that's
the
not orbs.
orbs. Yeah.
Orbs, there are things that we would classify as paranormal, but there's also a lot of dust.
Dust. Yep.
And so that's something else to recognize. There's just an insane amount of particulate matter throughout the whole house. There's also some very odd electromagnetic fields throughout the house that can be
Hmm.
explained with old wiring. So there's some weird wiring and things that are not normal in today's world. That, electrical wiring has changed over the years. I would not call the Sallie House up to code.
No.
And so there are some electromagnetic fields that are due to problems with the wiring and things like
Hmm.
that. It's also old plumbing.
Yep.
The plumbing is not, it's not new. It knocks in the walls. If you flush the toilet upstairs, about 20 seconds later, there's a knocking in the wall
Hmm. In the
downstairs
dining room.
in the
Yep.
dining room.
Which is directly downstairs from the upstairs bathroom.
Yeah, and it is every single time.
Hmm. Yep.
And so that is not paranormal. That's old plumbing. There's lead paint.
Hmm.
I would bet money that there's asbestos tiles somewhere in there.
Somewhere. There's gotta be.
Those, but I would
Gotta
bet
be.
money. Um, you know, there's probably other things that we didn't catch.
Probably.
Um,
Probably.
but in other words, environmentally, there's a lot of issues going on in this house. And so
Hmm.
some of the things that people experience can be explained environmentally. And one thing that I thought was pretty cool was right after we did this, um, there was a paranormal group that came in that you may have heard of,
Hmm.
Ghost Adventures.
Hmm.
Um,
Probably heard of them. Yeah.
you probably heard of them. And they mentioned this environmental assessment we had done, and Zach Bagans was actually wearing
That's why he wears the mask.
he
He's got a respirator. He's got the respirator on.
was wearing the respirator to go down the basement, and I feel that.
Well.
But that was cool to have that mentioned,
Hmm.
that we had done that. So we did learn a lot from that assessment.
Yeah.
Um,
Now, all of that would suggest that maybe we haven't had that much paranormal happen at the Sallie House, right? Because we've just laid out, oh, well, the Sallie story is kind of, there's some questions about the Sallie story, and oh, there's lots of mold and there's knocking in the walls. But of those thousand hours of evidence that we have collected, we have actually had quite a few experiences there.
we've collected evidence and we've had
Yeah.
experiences, and I like to talk about the things we debunked first
Yes.
because I feel like hopefully that means we've ruled out a lot of things
Yeah.
as we've had some of these experiences, so we feel more comfortable calling them paranormal. And that's something we try to do with any investigation we do is figure out what we can get rid of first before
Mhm.
we say here's a paranormal thing.
Yeah.
And so we've got both personal experiences and some evidence. um, but I would say there are some consistencies
Hmm. Hmm.
throughout some of the evidence that we've gotten. Um, and the biggest one, what did we say? It was consistently
Yeah,
inconsistent.
the house is consistently inconsistent. And I say that because one thing to remember about this house is, and this is still true, it was true then, it's still true now, just anybody can rent this house and investigate it. They still do overnights, that you can just
And
rent
they're
the
not
house.
chaperoned, which
They're
means
not
you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, so there's not someone from the Chamber of Commerce that's there with you, or at least there wasn't when we were there. I don't know that that's true today. Um, and so just anyone could go into that house and do just about anything. And so, we would find that the activity in the house would be consistent in the in the sense that we would get activity. We would get EVPs fairly consistently. We would have flashlight activity where we would, turn the flashlight just off and ask, entities to interact with it.
K2 activity,
K2
REM pod
activity,
activity.
REM pod activity, and apart from places where we knew the EMF was kind of funky in the house, like for example, there's one place in the floor in the nursery where if the light is on in the kitchen, it pegs your K2 every single time. And so we would always put the K2s far away from that spot. It was like a little tiny
Or
place.
make sure that the lights were off
Or
in the
make sure that the
kitchen.
lights were off.
The
It'd be like,
first few times that happened, man, we were so
we were
excited.
like, oh my gosh, look at that. It's spiked clear to orange. That's amazing. But we learned, there's about a 6 by 6 inch square in the middle of that floor that you probably shouldn't put your K2 meter over. But we would have all of these activity, or we'd have all this activity, and at the same time, it would be inconsistent in the sense that we would come into the house and we would get a sense that we were talking to some sort of entity that wasn't the one we were talking to last week when we were in the
Yeah.
house. Um, you know, we wouldn't walk in and be talking to Sally every week. In fact, we fairly seldom talked to anything that called itself Sally. And you could take that, you can interpret that a couple of different ways, right? So, like on the one hand, you could say, well, I mean, my perspective on that is like, well, ghosts, if humans can lie and like act like they're someone else, then of course a spirit could do the same. But I think we were there so often that I think we would have come back around to like thinking we were talking to the same spirit or entity or whatever, eventually. And that didn't happen very often. It was almost like you're investigating a new place every week,
A lot of times, yeah.
which was kind of weird. Now looking back on it, like I never really thought about it like that till just now. But so we have like a set of questions. Like anyone who does this for any amount of time will know that when you sit down to do, an EVP session, if you ever watch Ghost Hunters, you kind of get this sense, right? That there is a set of questions that everyone asks. We all kind of start an EVP session a similar way. Is there anyone here with us? How many are here? Who are you? How old are you? What's your gender? Yada yada. And we would go through those every single week because one, that was just kind of what we did, but we would very seldom get the same answers from people.
There was one answer we got a lot, though.
There
And this
is.
goes back to the
To
cross-dressing ice
Charles
dancer.
Finney, yes.
Because we always ask gender, and you ask it, are you a man? Or because you're asking yes and no, obviously.
Mhm.
Are you a man? Are you a woman? And we would get nothing. And we would say, are you a boy? Are you a girl? And we'd say, are you transgender?
And we would get responses.
And we would get responses.
Hmm.
And that was consistent.
Hmm.
And that was interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that led me at points to think, okay, so this is Charles Finney.
Right. Right. Yeah, and we would
But
there was a period of time where I was like really digging into the like prohibition stuff because that's one thing I would really like to research about the house more is anything else around Charles Finney and prohibition.
mm.
Because we know that he was selling illegal liquor in right before the Volstead Act. So I find it hard to believe that he would have quit, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he was a changed man after the state's attorney's office was like, you have to resign.
Hey, that could change
It
you.
could change you, I guess. And so there was a period of time where I was asking lots of questions around that, and we were getting lots of responses.
Yeah.
And so that was, I guess, probably the only consistency
Yeah.
in terms of response, the kinds of responses we were getting. And one other thing, too, is that, this always happened to you, is we would be setting up equipment.
Oh, yeah.
We would be setting up. We have this sort of standard setup, right? So we have our DVR cameras that we would set up in different rooms, and we have all the things we're setting up, and almost just with a degree of regularity that is almost maddening. We we would be setting up equipment, and stuff would happen.
And people talk about this all the time.
Yes.
I've heard so many other investigators talk about I'm setting up equipment and stuff happens and the camera wasn't on yet and this happened and it happened a lot. And I mean somewhat dramatic things. I mean, I had balls thrown at me.
Very dramatic, not somewhat, very dramatic. Yeah. Yeah, because in the nursery, one of the things that people do is they'll bring toys for Sally.
There's a
And
lot of toys there.
there are an absurd amount of toys. Like truly, it's
Sometimes they rotate, like
they do like they'll disappear for a while and then they'll
yeah.
come back. It's very odd.
And that's not paranormal.
Maybe it is. I don't know.
I was gonna say that's people from the chamber
Maybe.
changing things out.
Do we know that? And so there's lots of toys up there, and yeah, like we would, Chris, I remember the investigation. You came downstairs and you were like,
Tell me the camera was
tell
on.
me the camera was on because somebody just threw a ball at me, and of course the camera wasn't on because that would be too convenient because we'd be famous and we wouldn't be doing this podcast. And so yeah, that kind of stuff happened all the time. Or it would happen when we would start an investigation and we would be introducing ourselves and introducing, talking through the history of the house and getting people acquainted with equipment and things like that. We have a video from one of these investigations that we'll put in the show notes and we'll put it up on Patreon and our Facebook and everywhere of the blinds in the living room closing while we're sitting there talking with people about.
In this case, the cameras happened to be on.
Yes, in this case, they did happen to be on. And you can see clear as day, the blinds just close.
Yeah.
And there's somebody sitting in a chair in front of the window, but he's very clearly not interacting with the woman.
I think it was a woman.
I don't.
Regardless,
whoever was sitting there.
And we had them, try rocking the chair. Like,
around.
We tried to make it happen again.
Yeah.
We really wanted it to happen again, but it didn't.
Yeah, we did.
But we have it on film.
And so that was one of the things that's really consistently inconsistent about the house.
Yeah.
Which seems like a little bit of a paradox, but one thing too that I think I want to talk about is there is this perception in Atchison, and I think this is partly because it's a rural college town, that going to the Sallie House or that the Sallie House is like demonic or that it is like this portal and that you can't even.
The reason for that, to be fair, I mean, we've experienced a lot of hauntings in different locations. It's never a kid.
Well, yeah, that's true.
It's never a child ghost.
Very seldom. Yeah.
99 times out of 100, it is not a child ghost.
Yeah.
And often I would lean towards the demonic, and we can talk about what that means for us in another episode. I think we have that scheduled.
Probably, yeah, somewhere down the line.
Talking about that, but anyway.
But yeah, so like there's this perception, and like you'll hear stories, like we would be unloading the car, and people would drive by and would be like, "Oh, are you going in there?" And we're like, "Yeah, we're here every week." Like, what do you mean are we going in there? And there was this perception, we would hear people tell us stories about, they went to the house and they stepped in the yard and were overcome with this energy and felt like they were pushed down or whatever. And we just never experienced anything.
Yeah, we never experienced anything that I would term demonic.
No, because we wouldn't have gone back every week if that was the case. I mean, I wouldn't have taken money to tour the public through there.
Yeah. We did experience some things that I guess you could call not as friendly. I mean, there were a lot of scratches, things like that. But I don't equate being scratched with a demonic entity necessarily.
Yeah, no. I mean,
particularly the kinds of scratches that we saw there.
Yeah.
I mean, they weren't super dramatic.
Mm-hmm.
They just looked like a little scratch.
I mean, it could have been Mittens and Buttercup. We don't know. It could have been Mittens.
Maybe they were playing with the K2s.
They could have been. They could have. But yeah, I mean, we would get, you hear stories about that house, and talk about specific areas of the house where there is more activity, and we certainly experience that too.
Though I have to say, a lot of times you hear about the most activity in the nursery. We did have experiences in the nursery, but I think the master bedroom actually
we got much more activity.
Had much more activity and much more consistent activity, particularly flashlight activity and K2s.
K2s in there, big time.
And when I say that type of activity, we would designate, this flashlight is a yes, this one is a no, or we'd designate different things, and we'd get very consistent responses within that investigation. Not necessarily week to week, but within that investigation, we would get very consistent responses. And it was funny because, if you've ever done investigating, that you'll sit there for hours and hours and get absolutely nothing. And, you're just sitting there talking to yourself, which, what does that say about us as people?
That's why you're here for this podcast, to answer that question.
But almost every week, we got lots of activity. in that master bedroom.
Enough to not be bored. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in fact, there were a few investigations and really only a few of the 50 something we did or whatever, um, where very little happened and we'd only get, 10 minutes of flashlight activity and we'd be pissed.
Yeah, that we would be upset about that. Yeah.
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 Whereas other locations, if we got 10 minutes of activity, we were thrilled.
Yeah.
But there, and so that's how much activity there really is going on there, that we had such consistent activity that if we didn't get activity, and literally if we didn't get activity within 5 to 10 minutes of being in the room, we were like, oh, screw it, we're going to go to the other
We're
room.
going to a different room. Yep.
And that is not the case with other places we've been. I mean, we'll sit there for a really,
Hours.
really long time.
Nothing. Yeah. Yeah, but one thing I think about the spaces in the house that get talked, I mean, the basement gets talked about a lot. And, we didn't go down there a lot because your mold sensitivities and my mold sensitivities and
Other people
I've seen other people, but even still, like,
I was always very open with the public though, saying like, I'm not going down
yeah.
there, but it is not because there's a demon down there.
No.
Unless Aspergillus is
And
the
that's,
demon's
yeah, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about this demon in the Sallie House basement, right? So, like, in addition to the Sallie House story, that's not really where the lore ends. And I think that's what is most interesting to me personally about the Sallie House is that the lore kind of grows.
Yeah.
Every year we would go up there and we would be doing these tours and we would meet people from Atchison or from other places all over the US. I mean, people traveled from quite a ways to do these investigations. And people would tell us stories about, things they had heard about the house. And one of the really popular ones was that after the Pickmans moved out of the house, there was a nurse that lived there. And reports say that, or these stories say that she was, I believe they say she was Wiccan, right?
I think
Or
it's
some
like
sort of witch, right?
Yeah.
And we have feelings about that. One, because there's really no sort of I've never seen anything that would lead me to believe that that's true. And even if you're Wiccan, that doesn't mean any of these other things that you were
That's the
summoning
thing.
demons and things like that. Because when you go in the
Most
basement,
Wiccans would really not
would
do that.
frown upon it. Right? And so one of the things in the basement that people point to is there is supposedly this upside down pentagram that's been painted on the floor. Now, before we get into like the nitty gritty of why
what's down
I'm
there.
skeptical of that, I just want to point out one thing about things being upside down on the floor.
On the floor. Just walk around to the other side.
Just walk around to the other side. It's no longer upside down. So I'm not convinced that that's the case. I have seen people who've claimed to reproduce what pentagram was on the floor because it's been like supposedly spray painted over. There's like we'll put pictures in the show notes so that this makes a little more sense so you can look at it. But that's something that people would say, is why the house is evil and bad. And there's a couple of issues that I have with that argument. One is that, okay, if this woman was Wiccan, I'm doubting any of that. But also,
there are reports that or stories that she's like sacrificing animals.
Yeah, there were stories about that.
And there's no real evidence of that.
Well, and my problem with that too is like, okay, well then what does that mean about what happened to the Pickmans? She lived there after them.
Right.
So like, what does that mean? But yeah, but with that said though, I know that we've gone into that house and gone down to the basement and seen that people had, burnt candles down there, done who knows what.
We've seen evidence of people
doing
some sort of rituals down there. We've also seen a lot of garbage. Like people
lots of garbage. There was one time somebody broke into the house and we found, was it McDonald's?
They left McDonald's.
Yeah.
Pick up your damn trash. Whether you're there to investigate or to break in, whatever it is, pick up your damn trash. Come on.
It added to the ambiance, though. I mean, come on.
McDonald's added to
Yeah, man, it did. It gives it that roadside attraction vibes. But anyway, so that's the big thing with the basement, right? Is people talk about that spot down there. And I don't buy the upside down pentagram thing. And like pentagrams mean lots of things to lots of different people. And so for us to assume that it means one of those things without really anything to go on is like kind of sketchy to me. But it's also very moldy down there.
And it's dusty, it's dusty, creepy, it's dark.
Lots of bugs. I would be skeptical of any orb photo in the basement.
And we did not have, I mean, other people, and one thing I just want to say is I can't say what other people have
For
experienced.
sure.
They might have experienced horrible demonic activity down there. We did not.
Yeah.
In fact, we didn't get much of anything down there.
No, we really very
Um,
seldom got activity in the basement.
but there's a creepy part of the basement. And this is one of the things people talk about. And some people say, we mentioned there's this tunnel between the two houses and it's bricked up now. There's also a crawl space and it's dirty and crap has been thrown back there for years. That's not the tunnel. And so I just want to, people think that that's like
Yeah.
the opening to the tunnel. It's not. It's just a crawl space. And, we've sent people, I won't go back there because it's furry. Back to the
Yeah.
mold. But I just have these horrible allergies and I don't want to. But we
Hmm.
have had members of our team go back there and kind of check it out. Um, and it's not the tunnel. There's nothing back there that's other than kind of construction garbage. Like there's old wood, there's that
It's
sort of
like I've
thing.
lived in a couple of old houses from similar periods, and it looks like any other dirt floor basement
Mm.
section in a house like that. It's like construction stuff. It's like old pieces of wood. It's like broken cinder blocks and rocks and dirt and the occasional dead bird and like that kind of stuff that
Yeah,
you find in a house that's that old. So it's gross.
yeah, so I mean smells coming from back there could potentially be dead things.
I mean, yeah, I mean many of those are probably
There was a
decayed.
wasp's nest back
Yeah,
there.
there's regular wasp problems in the house.
There's um but people will say that there's something demonic back there. People will say that it's a portal. We have never experienced any of that. And I mean, we've been in this house a lot and we have not experienced that from down there. I
Hmm.
I will say it's creepy.
Yeah, it's creepy. It's a creepy old basement.
Um, but I don't think there's anything going on down there. And I definitely don't think there's anything with that crawl space.
Yeah, no, no, definitely
It's
not.
it's just a gross crawl space.
But you'll find, if you look, I mean, the Sallie House has been on almost every single social media YouTuber, paranormal investigative team group thing. They've been to the Sallie House more than likely. And almost everybody wants to go down there and do stuff. And they'll spend lots of time down there. I've watched people do the Gansfeld experiment stuff down there and like all kinds of stuff. And like you said, we didn't really get that. And even if we were gonna do a Gansfeld experiment, I wouldn't sit down there just because I don't want to breathe mold
Hmm.
while I'm sitting down there. But that's kind of a place in the house that really has this kind of it's got this lore built around it that like
And there is so much more activity in other parts of the house. And
yeah,
that
yeah, and that's what, is always surprising to me is like people are obsessed with the basement and I'm just like, okay,
and
I
and
mean,
all of the people who would come in for these public investigations, so many of them just wanted to go down and take their picture in the basement and like go
yeah.
for it,
Yeah, I mean, people would like come in and we wouldn't even be going and they'd like be like, "Oh, can I go see the basement?" And it's like, I mean, sure. Like you knock yourself
feel
out,
free.
man, but like it's not for me.
But I mean, we have hours and hours of recording from down there,
Yeah.
audio and video, and nothing.
Yeah.
Um, I think maybe a couple of K2 hits, but like
Yeah,
really,
maybe
I
everyone.
mean, we really, just didn't
Yeah.
experience things down there. Um,
But we did have like lots of other activity though.
yeah.
I mean, in addition to the blinds, I think one of the other big ones that we got on film is from the nursery. And so even though we didn't get lots of activity in the nursery, some of the stuff we did get was
It was
great.
pretty cool, yeah.
You want to talk about that for a little
The
minute?
football.
Yeah, the football, yeah.
And this used to be online. I don't know if it's still
It
there.
is. We will post
It
it in the
is.
show
Was
notes.
that did Atchison put it up? Because we gave the city of Atchison a lot of our
I
evidence.
believe someone posted it. It's on YouTube.
Um,
Yeah.
so we were in the nursery, and one of the things people do in there, because of the stories from the Pickmans, people will set up toys in a circle,
Yeah.
and try to interact with them and try to get an entity to interact through the toys, is how I should say it.
Hmm.
So one of our investigators was doing that with a group of, in this case, I believe it was students. So remember, we're professors, so
Yeah, I think it was
bring
students.
students places,
Yes.
Um, and so the students they're talking, and there's some flashlight activity going on. But one of the things that was on the floor was a Kansas City Chiefs football.
Hmm.
And so you hear the investigator say, like, could you roll that football? Because we ask all the time, move this, move that.
Hmm.
And it rolls. Not a lot, but it
It
rolls. And
rolls.
so everyone's like, oh, did that really happen? Did that, because it's
Hmm.
dark.
Hmm.
Um, for ambiance, you shut the lights off. There's no reason to
Of
shut the lights
course.
off, by the way.
You can see the K2 meter lights better.
You
Let's
can,
be,
and the flashlights,
and the
but I
flashlights.
mean, activity is going to happen whether it's light or dark,
Yes.
whether it's daytime, nighttime, any of that. Um, so they ask again, okay, they move the football back and they try sort of stepping around it to see if they can make it, shift or whatever, to see if it's the floor, the carpet, whatever. And they're not able to do that, but they ask it to do it again, and it does. And,
Hmm.
the same football rolls again. And that's interesting to me that something like that would happen twice on command. And so we have that video. Um, like I said, it's been up on the web
Yeah,
for a
yeah.
while.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think, while we said, because I think one of the uh, complaints that gets lodged against that video a lot, or that I've seen online,
Mm.
is that like, oh, well, the floors are uneven, or they rolled the ball themselves. And like, sure, you can say that all you want. We know the people
And the
who were in the
floors are
room. The
uneven,
floors are uneven,
but then
but
you would see it consistently
we've
rolling.
never had that happen before. Yeah, I
Right.
mean,
Or since.
in all of the 50 plus investigations we've done there, we've never had that happen except for that one time.
Yeah.
And so that always stood out to me as like, well, you can lodge whatever complaint you want against it, but we were in that house a lot and could never get anything like that
And
to
even
happen.
that day with that football, we had people kind of walking around it, stepping on the
Yeah,
floor hard,
trying to,
trying to make it move, and it wouldn't.
yeah.
So, again, you can believe it, not believe it, but that was an interesting thing that happened.
Hmm.
The other thing that happened in the nursery, um, we were on a public investigation, and some of the people who are on public investigations are believers,
Hmm.
some are not. And
Hmm.
we'll talk maybe a little bit later
Yes,
about
great segue. That's a great segue.
the types of people who come on these tours. But this was someone who clearly did not believe.
Hmm.
Everything was bull.
Yep.
There was nothing that was real, and that's fine. If that's what you believe, that's great. Um, but she was making fun of whatever entity might be there, kind of
Sort of
taunting,
haunting, yeah, yeah.
taunting whatever might be there. And we kind of said, hey, we don't do that.
Mhm.
We don't like to do that. And so then she started just kind of laughing that off. And we watched a scratch appear on her arm. Literally, she was just standing there.
Mhm.
And we saw a scratch appear across her forearm. And we and the person who was with her pointed it out to her and said, hey, that wasn't there.
Mhm.
And she looked at us and she said, well, I must have just done that. And we were like, no, no, we all watched. And there were 6 or 7 of us in the room
Mhm.
all saying, like, no, we all saw that.
Mhm.
And she's like, well, I guess I did it earlier and it just now appeared. I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, I don't either. I still don't know what that means.
So like if I scratch myself now, I could expect it to appear at, 9 p.m. tonight,
I
or
guess so. I don't know.
that I thought was a really weird way to say it, but the point being that, this scratch happened. We all saw it.
Mhm.
What caused it, I couldn't tell you, but it happened, and she just would not
Yeah.
admit that. Not,
Yeah.
but that was the other thing that happened kind of in the nursery.
Yeah.
In the master bedroom, in addition to kind of the consistent activity we'd get, we did on one occasion have one of our investigators who was pushed out of the closet.
Hmm. Hmm.
Not,
Pushed out of the closet.
that sounds
Not.
funny.
We're recording
Um,
this during Pride Month. Not that kind of push out of the
it is
closet.
Pride Month, yeah. Not that guy, but literally felt something push against his chest and pushed him
Yeah.
backwards. So that happened in the master.
Yeah.
What were some of the other things? Oh, the water.
Yeah, we would pretty regularly like have the water turn on and off. Like we would be downstairs getting stuff, either unpacking and getting ready for an investigation, or we'd be packing stuff up, and like the water in the upstairs bathroom would just be on.
And it would turn itself on and off. So it's
Yeah,
like, how sometimes there's issues with your plumbing,
with water pressure
with
and
water
stuff.
pressure and
Yeah.
things, and it would go on and off. So that was odd.
Yeah, it was very odd.
Lots and lots of EVPs, which we
Yes.
can put some of those up.
Yep.
Some of them were kind of creepy sounding.
Yeah.
Um, we had one that was like mocking one of our investigators once. That was, some disembodied voices. We would get
Yeah, we would
disembodied
get that
voices a
going.
fair amount. A lot of sounds of just shuffling around, movement,
Yeah.
footstep.
Yeah, you'd be
It
like
was,
sitting in a bedroom and hear like it sounds like someone's out in the hallway.
yeah. And lots of shadows.
Yeah, lots of
Lots of
shadows.
shadows.
Yeah, we would see stuff that we couldn't really explain like that too. And to go back to kind of the consistently inconsistent aspect of the Sallie House, we would regularly, because we were there all the time, we would get, I guess, creative about the questions we would be asking during an EVP session. And so I remember, so the Sallie House was actually one of the first places I ever investigated. So the first time I ever went on an investigation, we were investigating a couple of different locations in Atchison. And I forget what the name of the other house was off the top of my head, but we were going to this other house first, and then came over to the Sallie House, and we were in the master bedroom, and I just asked, do you like Star Wars? And we got a positive response on the flashlights, and that was cool. And so we would just kind of ask, silly questions just because, we had been in there a lot, and we would get answers.
Yeah, we when Ghost Adventures was there,
Hmm.
after they had been through,
Yeah.
um, we felt the need to ask, what
What'd you think?
the entities thought of Ghost Adventures, and I'm sorry, Zach, but we consistently got for the next several weeks. We got responses that they did not like
They
Zach,
were not huge fans.
but did like the others. So
So
sorry.
do with that what you will. But yeah, so we had lots of different kinds of experiences there, and I think some of that, it just speaks to the utility of investigating a place that consistently. I don't think there's anywhere we've investigated that much.
No.
And so, just being in a location, I think that's something that I always think about when I watch all of the paranormal television shows and just hear people talking about their own investigating. Is like, well, you go to a place once and you're there for maybe 5 or 6 hours. And like, you may go 5 or 6 hours and not get jack, but that doesn't mean that there's necessarily nothing going on
There
there.
could be 300 ghosts there, and they
Yeah,
just don't want to deal with
they
you.
just took the night off, man. Like, you don't know. And so I think that's one thing that I think about, because when we go on other investigations, and say we investigate a place once, if we have an hour where we've got a solid, flashlight K2
Someone's
session
really
going, we're
excited.
like, that's awesome, and we talk about the Sallie House, and we're like, well, we got these things moving, we saw scratches, we got, we
Yeah,
got
as we talked
shadows.
about, it's like, wow, we really had a
We
lot of
did.
activity.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Is like we had a lot of activity. We had like almost the full range, like short of full body apparitions. We had just about everything that could
Yeah,
happen at the Sallie House. But that's because we spent
including
5 years.
having people bang on the windows from the outside, and these are people.
Yes.
Oh, you're investigating, so we're gonna,
Yeah,
mess with you.
Atchison. We love Atchison. It's an interesting place.
Including having, the house next door that was built by the other Finney.
Yes.
Uh, remember, it's a college town.
Yes.
So while we were there were various college students living in that house. It was,
Yeah, because
one of these
it was
rental
the Benedictine wrestling team
for a while.
for a
Yeah.
while. I don't know if it is anymore, but it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, there were always interesting things happening next door, but not paranormal.
I mean, yes, paranormal strictly by our definition.
Well, the
No.
cops came and broke up a party
But
once.
that was fun. That was really
That was
it was watching them scatter was great.
Yeah.
It was a good time. But yeah, so I think we investigated at the Sallie House for almost 5 straight years, and
It was
we
five straight years.
we saw yeah, well, I mean, we weren't there consistently.
Oh, right.
We were there
Yeah.
consistently in the sense that we were there for the haunted season for 5 years.
Yeah,
And sometimes
and obviously
outside of that
we did
season.
several
Yeah.
other investigations throughout the year, but
But it's not like we were there every weekend.
Right.
We have lives and do other things. Sort of. But one of the things that we haven't really talked about with the Sallie House, is that, reminding everyone that we are, academic researchers too. We were asked, after, I think it was after the first year that we had done the investigations for the Chamber of Commerce, that they wanted some like information or some data about the people who were doing the investigations. And so we were like, sweet, we get to design a survey. And we did a little bit of research on, the experiences that people felt like they were having in the house. And so we, put together this little survey. And for as far as the city was concerned, it was for some quality control, right? To see kind of how they were doing, what people liked and didn't like. But for us, we wanted to kind of see, what is it that what kind of experiences do people think they're having? Is it actually impacting their like belief about the paranormal? And so this kind of gets back to your story about the woman who scratched herself or didn't scratch herself. We conducted this survey over the course of a whole haunted season, and basically we would ask participants, or we would ask people who were, listen to me, researchers speak. We would ask people who are coming to investigate. Um, we would ask them to take the survey before they came in, and it would ask about their previous experiences.
Post
Yeah, well, no
design.
one else is going to know what that is, Chris. Okay. Okay, well, most of the people, okay, well, the four researchers that listen to this, including our relatives, will know what it is. Everybody else is like, what is that? So we would ask them to take this survey before the investigation and after the investigation. And it would ask about their perceptions about different types of phenomena, whether or not they thought they had an experience, what they thought was in the house, whether they thought it was a demon, whether they thought it was Sally, something else, whatever. And we kind of came back with that really one investigation didn't change people's perspectives that much, which wasn't that surprising.
It's not surprising. Unless something really crazy happens
Right,
in one
right.
investigation, like you mentioned seeing a full-bodied
Yeah,
apparition at Waverly, like
that
that's
would
an
change, that changes the
that could
person.
change your mind. And I mean,
That changes the person.
those are not the normal things that happen in the course of a couple hour investigation typically.
Yeah, yeah, but like
Uh,
in addition to just the people's survey responses, as anthropologists, we also, kind of thought about the whole experience of doing those investigations as part of the research process too. And we kind of sat down and thought about, okay, what did we learn about the people who come to investigate the Sallie House beyond what their survey responses tell us? And we kind of broke that down into like these three groups of people, that there are, people that come into the house that are complete non-believers, like what you were saying with this woman who,
and no matter what you
yeah,
do, they are not going to leave it. They will come up with an explanation for anything,
yes,
even to the point where their explanation makes no
yes,
sense. Like the scratches, I did that earlier. No, you didn't.
yes.
Give me something else,
Yeah. And so we have the non-believers, then we had the hardcore Sally believers. And even after we walked them through, our own research, our meeting, or, our seeing the Pickmans speak and talking with them, reading the book, doing, all the historical research on the house, they did not care. Sally was there, and we would, and we didn't, discourage people from doing this, but like you could see it in the way that people would conduct themselves during the investigation. So they would be asking questions of Sally. They would want to be talking to Sally. And like when we would be doing an EVP session, if we were like, "Are you Sally?" It was like we're just bored, and we're like,
Yeah.
"Okay, come on, really? Like, can I get the flashlight to turn on because I'm bored?" you know. And so
But that was the first thing some of
that
these
was the
folks
first
that,
thing some of these
yeah.
folks wanted. They really wanted confirmation of that story, and like we really hurt their feelings within the
And
first
people
10
brought
minutes.
toys, they brought
Yeah,
candy.
toys, candy, that was really
Mhm.
common too. Yeah. And so people really wanted to have that experience of, communicating with Sally, by just being, investigating. And then we had
We
people,
had the people who it was a demon.
yeah, we also had those people. Those were fewer and
But
farther between, but yes.
but it's interesting because you hear the stories that the Pickmans share,
Yeah.
and everyone goes to the well, it's Sally. But what about all the crap that was happening to Tony? I mean,
It's
that
some weird
wasn't
stuff.
positive.
Some weird stuff.
So
Yeah.
some people took that as it being more demonic, and so then there are some people who there is a demon in this house, and I'm here because there's a demon and
Because,
I want to interact with it. Okay, that's a whole other episode
yeah,
of
man.
why you feel that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I'm telling you, these are people who legitimately
Yeah.
think that it is a demon, and they, I guess, want to say that they were in a house with a demon.
I don't know. I don't get it, but that's fine. Well, again,
But
we'll
and
talk about our
you couldn't
perspectives from it.
convince them otherwise with
No,
that either.
no.
Even though they come in and the worst thing that happens is there's shuffling outside the door.
Right.
Like,
A flashlight turned on and off a couple
yeah.
times, yeah. And then we had the sort of overbelievers.
Hmm.
And these are folks that we kind of characterize as, maybe they didn't necessarily believe in Sally, they might have, but they were really hesitant to debunk anything and
Yeah, everything's
believed
paranormal.
most everything that happened in the house was paranormal. And this was always the folks who were taking photos and seeing orbs. And in that house, like we've said, a particulate matter in there is pretty gnarly. And you're going to get stuff in your photos. If anyone is in that house moving around at all, you're going to get
Yeah.
stuff floating through your photos. And so, you know, that group of people are interesting to investigate with. but but yeah, it was interesting, thinking looking back on it now, and thinking about, how we had all those experiences at the Sallie House, and we had basically every kind of phenomenon you could have, more or less. Um, and then thinking about just like how different people are who come to paranormal stuff. I mean, yeah, you've got the non-believers who like come because they got dragged by their girlfriend or whoever to come, but like there's people who come as non-believers, I think, to like experience a thing and see if there's actually something, an experience to be had.
I think the people who come in who are skeptics, I won't call them non-believers, skeptics
Sure,
in that
skeptics,
that
yeah,
they don't think that there's anything out there, but they're interested.
open to the possibility.
Yeah, those
Yeah,
are actually people who are really fun to investigate
yeah,
with
yeah.
because they're open to both debunking and not being able
Weird
to
stuff
debunk.
happening. Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah,
and so I think those are the folks who I find it most interesting
yeah,
to investigate with. I don't want to investigate with someone necessarily who already knows the answer.
yeah,
Whether your answer is it's not true or it is true, I want someone who's open to whatever happens.
yeah.
And so to me, those are the people who were most interesting to me in running those
Hmm.
investigations. The people who are open to things.
Hmm.
And it occurs to me that we did not we mentioned a couple times this idea of a portal,
Yeah,
and I do think we should talk about that. It
yeah.
kind of goes back to the basement because people say there's a portal in the
Hmm.
basement.
Hmm.
Um, we said things are very inconsistent,
Yeah.
but there's always activity.
Hmm.
And so that lends itself to the idea of, well, are things coming and going?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, I never termed it a portal,
Yeah, I never did either.
but I did think that there were things coming and going. What I always attributed it to was the different groups of people who would come in
Yeah,
and do things like pull out a Ouija board.
yeah. Or, make the entire nursery into a Ouija board with a pendulum from the ceiling.
Yeah, there
Yeah,
was a group
yeah.
that did that.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think there was always, it did always feel like there was a sense of like transience,
yeah.
and it didn't
And it
feel,
could be that people coming in who are investigating have stuff attached to them. That's a
oh,
whole
always, that's
other
always possible too.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Um,
But I never got the sense of a portal, and maybe that's my
no,
own skepticism about
but
portals,
the idea of portals, yeah.
which I don't know how I feel about sometimes because I do like to think about interdimensional space and
I
those
I
kinds of
think the
things,
thing, and
but
this may just be my own ignorance, but I think the thing that gets me about portals is like it seems like a very amorphous idea. There's not like a lot of like there's not a very good, I don't know if explanation is the right word, but like you just say, okay, this is a portal, this house is a portal, this, basement is a portal. It's like, what does that actually mean
it's a
though? Like,
door, and I got plenty of them in my
right,
house.
right. The house already has those. Like, like I don't. I guess that's where I get hung up on portals because I'm like you with that. As I don't really know what to think about them because I feel like it's a very amorphous idea.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're using the term portal to mean that there's transience, I would say sure, because there is transience. I do think things are coming and going, but again, I attributed it to the people coming in and doing a variety of different things.
Mhm.
But we had not talked about that, and that is a common the portal at the Sallie House.
Mhm.
It's a crawl space.
It's a cross. It's
It's a
dusty,
moldy crawl space.
dusty. So,
So,
what do you think is so what do you think is the big takeaways from the Sallie House? What do you want people to take away from this, couple hours of rambling?
yeah, we've been talking for a while.
Hmm.
Be open to new evidence wherever you go
Hmm.
and don't investigate somewhere once.
Yeah,
Um, I get asked all the time, and I'll ask you,
yeah,
what's at the Sallie House?
yeah.
What's there?
Hmm. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think
Not Sally.
not Sally. I don't think Sally's there, much to I think everyone's dismay. I don't think Sally's there. I'm not really sure what I think Sally is. But there's something there. When people ask me, I'm like, I'm not sure what's there, but we always get activity. We very seldom go home disappointed. When the Sallie House has an off night for us, it's like a good night for most other places.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the other thing, I think the takeaway for me with the Sallie House, or what I think is important to remember, is like, you can have most of the places you'll investigate have this big story behind them. And I think it's really important for us not to let that cloud our experiences at a location. And it's kind of like this idea of, like we talked about in the last episode, of being reflexive, right? And
Yeah.
like recognizing, okay, what are my assumptions that I have about this place? Because if I went into the Sallie House and all I did was ask Sallie if Sallie was there, and I tried to have a conversation with Sallie, I'm having a very different experience of the Sallie House than we had over the course of, 5 years of not assuming that Sallie was
Right.
there. Um, and so I think that's really important for thinking about investigating the paranormal in general, right? Because, there's so many, I guess, factions in the paranormal community about, certain assumptions that we have about certain kinds of phenomena, right? So like, there's a whole faction of Bigfoot folks that are, they all back that flesh and blood hypothesis that Bigfoot is a corporeal being that is some lost hominid. And then there's, the split over whether or not Bigfoot's extra dimensional or spiritual or whatever, right? And I think we always have to remember, like, the ideas that we have about a type of phenomena really are going to influence the way we interpret evidence.
And by extension, doing the things to learn what might be true and not true about a story. So the historical
Yeah.
research, the environmental
Yeah.
assessments, and I'm not saying everybody can do the environmental assessment kind of the way we did.
Yeah, sure, sure.
Um,
But there's
but
little
what,
things you can
but
do.
whatever things you have, whatever tools you have available to you, which may be better than the tools we have available
Hmm.
to us,
Hmm.
to use all of them
Hmm.
to try to come up with the answer.
Hmm.
And that goes back to what I was saying about the kinds of people who I enjoy investigating with. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, being open to things. So don't walk into the Sallie house assuming that it's Sallie.
Right.
And don't walk in expecting to experience what Tony Pickman experienced
Hmm.
because he's a different person.
Hmm.
And whatever he was experiencing might have been attached to him, might have been attached to the house. It might have been things coming together.
Hmm.
You just don't know. So being willing to examine all of the evidence and to actively go after that evidence in different ways.
Hmm. So what do we have coming up next?
Well, next time, we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, and that is a medical mystery.
Woohoo!
Um, so we're going to talk about, or what I'd call a contested illness,
Coincidence.
uh, and that is something called Morgellons or Morgellons disease, and I've heard it pronounced both
Yeah,
ways.
yeah.
Um, but it's a really fascinating medical mystery where there's little filaments that come out of sores through your
Mhm.
skin. Um, and I'll just leave it at
Let's leave
that.
it at that. Yeah, I was
Leave
gonna
it at
say,
that.
let's leave it at that. So
And
yeah, if that's something you're into, if you want to find out about medical mysteries, come join us on the next episode. Thanks for joining us on Beyond the Human, where the strange, the supernatural, and the deeply human collide. If today's journey into the unknown sparked your curiosity, we'd love for you to subscribe, leave a review, and share the show with fellow seekers of the extraordinary.
have a story, question, or theory of your own? Reach out. We want to hear how the paranormal shapes your world, too. You can find us online at Patreon, Facebook, and Instagram.
Until next time, stay curious, stay critical, and keep thinking beyond the human.